Hello everyone, welcome back to the session. Today we are going to discuss chapter 4 from grade 6 CBSE. And the name of the chapter is The Old Clock. Well, this chapter is basically about how one can win over the other person if one is honest. Yes, you heard me right. So there's a shopkeeper who happens to tackle the robbers the right way and wins over that situation. So the name of the shopkeeper is Mr. Ray. He managed to protect himself. Not only that, guys, but also showed robbers the right path. So it's all about peace, harmony, honesty, and goodwill. So let's see what is the chapter all about. We'll read it in detail, discuss all the difficult word meanings. Christmas Eve had arrived. As last-minute shoppers were going home, a thick white sheet of snow lay over Salt Lake City, USA. Yet the lights were still burning in the old clock shop, as Ray, its old deaf owner, worked on a clock he had sold that day. So here, Eve basically means the night time or evening, which is, you can also say it's more like the sunset. And Mr. Ray is the name of the person who owns this clock shop. So he's deaf. Deaf means a person who's hard of hearing, who can't hear, right? Who is hard of hearing. So now what happens here is, it's about Christmas evening and it was time to close the shop, and all the shops were almost closed at this place. The name of the place is Salt Lake City, USA. But still the lights of Mr. Ray's shops were on because he was repairing a clock that he had sold. And if we talk about Mr. Ray, he's the owner of a clock shop. He's old and he's deaf. Having finished his work, Ray stood up and was on his way to the back room when a cold rush of air from the front door hit the back of his neck. Now, after he managed to finish his work, Mr. Ray got up and moved towards his place. That might have been towards the back of the shop. And as he was on his way back to the room, suddenly he felt a cold wave of air that touched his neck, probably because somebody might have opened the front door. So let's see what happens next. He turned to meet a last-minute shopper, but his old wise eyes told him that this was not a shopper. He saw two men, one in his 20s, the other closer to 50. The younger man remained at the door. The older man approached the counter with no sign of friendliness in his eyes. Ray was able to hide his growing fear as he slowly pushed a notepad and a pencil across the counter. So, counter is that table across which dealings are done. Table across which business is conducted. Okay, guys? And what is a notepad? Notepad is that page, is that pad that you use to write the stuff, write anything on it. That's called the notepad. It's the writing notebook. So what happens as he turned to see the last minute shopper who had come to his shop because he'd already closed the shop and was on his way back to home. As he turned back, because he was old, he was wise enough, he had enough experience, he came to know that these people who had just moved into his shop were not shoppers. They were not here to pay money and get the stuff. Rather, those two men, one of whom was quite young and was in his 20s, and the other one was middle-aged and was in his 50s, had some other intention. So the younger man, he stood at this door, he stopped at the door, and the middle-aged man came to the counter to talk to Mr. Ray. And his eyes weren't very wide, his eyes weren't showing any sign of friendliness. Rather, they were reflecting the cruelty of his heart. That he's not going to be very kind, he's going to be cruel. But somehow Ray managed to control his fear, managed to hide his fear. He didn't show and he didn't reflect the people, the robbers, that he was scared of them. Rather, he slowly pushed a notepad and a pencil towards them because he was deaf. He couldn't hear the other person. He smiled at the unfriendly face, then pointed to his ears and shook his head from side to side like this. A quick look of surprise changed the man's face as he studied the notepad, then turned and said something to his friend. So now the information on the notepad kind of brought a change on the, when we talk about the expressions of that man. So his facial expressions changed when he read what was written on the notepad. That was offered to him by Mr. Ray. So he smiled. Mr. Ray smiled and then with gestures pointing towards his ears and shaking his head from side to side, told the other man something. And he probably might have told that this man here, it's going to be an easy job because this person here is deaf. So let's see what happens next. Ray used the chance to look closely at the man, paying attention to the shape of a gun and a restless hand in the man's right pocket. Anger boiled within him, but it was kept down by an inner voice that said, "Be still." He wrote on the notepad, "May I help you?" For the first time, the older man looked directly at Ray and smiled. A cruel, mocking smile. They both understood why he was there, why his friend remained at the door. He looked like men who were down on their luck and were now ready to try something they would later be sorry about. So now what happens here? There were two men out there and the information kind of changed their heart and their facial expressions because they were like that this is going to be easy. Let me tell you what is a restless. A restless means uneasy. When you're quite nervous, that's restless. And mocking means making fun of. Laugh in an unkind way. You'll say laugh in an unkind way. Wicked way. So down on one's luck means having bad luck. Down on luck means bad luck. So now this gave Ray some time to look and, just examine the man closely who was there at his shop. He had a look, the Ray had a look at the shape of his gun and his movement in his coat's right pocket, because he had one of his hand in his coat's right pocket. Though Ray was feeling angry, very angry deep inside. But he didn't get it reflect on his face. His wisdom, his knowledge, being a wise man, made him stay cool and be still. So he asked the man writing on notepad, the middle-aged man who happened to visit his shop, if he, that is Ray, could help him. And with this, the man looked straight at Ray, the shopkeeper, and smiled. Though it was a cruel smile, as if he's making fun of the shopkeeper who doesn't know what's there in his fate. But now the picture was quite clear. They understood the reason for being there in the shop. And why the other man who was there in his 20s, he was standing at the outside at the door. So Ray was looking at them as both of them looked unlucky, who were trying something, who were trying their luck, and of course they'll have to repent later. They'll have to feel sorry about it because they were not here at this shop for a very good cause. They might have had plans to harm the shopkeeper and get away with the money and precious items. So we'll see what happens, but that we'll check in the next class. Thank you.